Hey everybody, just going to go over a little bit of the process behind the panels I did for my collaboration with Corter Leather. I like to start out by taping the back of my leather. It'll ensure it's not stretching or warping while you're actually tooling it. I then like to fully case it, so I'll spray it down with water until it stops soaking in and do a little bit of a glass slick, which gets the water right into the grain of the leather itself. Once the water's had a little bit of time to absorb in, you want to let it dry out to just about the color it was when you started. You don't want it to be wet, or you don't want it to be super wet still, and you also don't want it to be bone dry. From there, I'll start tracing out my drawing. I use like a plastic tracing film and a little stylus, and then I go into my swivel cuts. I like to make sure I'm holding my swivel knife straight up and down. You don't really want to be carving into it sideways. You want nice, clean, crisp lines. The particular knife that I'm using is made by a gentleman named Dwayne Watts. It's a yokeless swivel knife. It works amazingly for somebody like me who has kind of burnt out hands. I did a lot of years working in metalwork and stuff, and so traditional swivel knives actually cause me a lot of pain if I use them too much. So something like this, it's more akin to like drawing with a pen or a pencil. So I find I get like a lot more work time in while I'm using it. You also want to make sure that you are paying attention to how deep you're cutting as well. I cut about 1/3 to 1/2 of the way through, and I like to make sure that it's being cut through the same, like consistently throughout the entire piece. Another little tip is to also make sure that you're really comfortable with your movements. If you need to do a little bit of a test pass to make sure you can follow through with a bigger, like a longer stretch, if you have like a big long straight line to do or anything like that, you want to make sure you're not like contorting your wrist or your hand weird. That's just when you tend to slip or sort of move off your course a bit. So once my swivel cuts are all done, I'll move on to tooling. Unfortunately, in these videos, my hand's a little bit in the way. As this is the first one, they'll just get a little bit better from here. But personally, I like to use a very heavy checked beveler to go around the edges and just like really bring out any sort of big focal points. I go a little bit slow with this. I'm very intentional with how I line up the check marks with my stamps, and I'll go back and forth. I like to use modeling spoons quite a lot too. One thing with tooling is like you're basically sculpting the leather. So I have found some success in using the modeling spoon versus a smooth beveler. I find it quite a lot faster, and it's just more comfortable for me myself as well too. It's always a good idea just to kind of, keep some scraps handy, test your stamps, figure out what you want to do. There's all kinds of different types of stamps on the market. I'm currently learning a lot of the names and stuff for them myself. I know there's like things like lifters that'll kind of lift up the leather from underneath, which gives you like a really cool sort of focal point. There's all kinds of like punctuation. There's different kinds of bevelers. They don't always, I also don't always necessarily use a hammer as well too. Sometimes I'll use like a striped beveler to like just make almost like little hairlines and stuff. It's such a diverse art form, and there's so many ways you can do it. It's good just to, just give it a try. It's going to take a long time. It's taken me a long time. This is literally all I do, and I feel like I'm always learning and improving with each project. So, give yourself some time. If it's not working out quite right the first time, just try a different method, try a different way, watch more videos, check out different styles of work as well too. There's like more of the traditional Western sort of floral style, which I am just starting to kind of learn a little bit myself. I've also found, just through trial and error, there's quite a few different tooling leathers available on the market. Personally, and shown in this project, I prefer Herman Oak. I find it's such a classic leather. It holds a stamp nice and crisp. It's really nice to work with. The grain isn't too tight. Some of the European ones that I've tried out are actually a little bit too stiff, and I find them hard to lay down a nice stamp in. And so coming up here, you can see this is a heavy checked beveler. The stamp maker's name is Richard Brooks. He's out of Alberta, Canada. I really like his stamps. They're made of stainless steel, so they make such a nice impression. And what I like to do is I overlap by about 50%, and I make sure that the check marks are sort of saddling into the ones before it. That way you end up with like a nice clean line. You don't get any weird ridges in between the stamp that you just laid down and the one previous. It makes for like a nice consistent line. So once the tooling's all done, there's, a couple ways I like to go. It depends on the project, but for this one, we went with paint, so I'll just explain that a little bit more. Recently, I've come to discover the Alpha Flex line by Alpha 6. This is hands down the best paint I've ever worked with. This is not a sponsored ad. I bought these paints all by myself. I had a few different friends in the industry recommend them, and they were right. The pigments are so rich. It goes on so smooth, and it takes a lot less layers than some of the other paints that I've used. I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to talk poorly about them, but I will say that Alpha Flex is by far my personal favorite paint, and I've fully made the switch over. It's the only stuff I'll be using going forward. It's just so smooth, and as you can see in this little clip, like I'd gone a bit too dark with the original blue and threw down something a little bit lighter with no problems. One pass, one quick layer, and it was good to go. With the neons, I do like to do a little base coat of the white. That's why you'll see that here. Now, once that's all done, the most stressful part of the entire project comes to antiquing. So I have to preface this with, before I start antiquing, I do a very solid clear coat over top to protect the paint and any of the exposed leather from the antique finish, or you're going to end up with something that looks extremely muddy. It'll get it down into all the pores. So make sure you're clear coating first, and I personally like to let it set overnight just to really make sure it's on there. I know personally, like, I've ruined a couple projects being a little bit impatient with it and just kind of going for it. But to get like a nice clean antiquing, just be patient with that clear coat. From there, I'll let it sit on the surface just for a little while, not very long, like maybe 5 minutes. It'll get like a little bit hazier, and I'll proceed to buff it all off with a t-shirt, and then I let it dry, or cure, whatever you want to call it, a little bit longer, and that's it. One more layer of clear coat and you're good to go. Thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one.